Greetings.
Good morning, everybody.
What's up,
Or you
spine
wouldn't know
crackers?
what atemporal sort of just greeting to you all.
I know. I can't. I'm still not used to abstracting the YouTube audience away from my own immediate experience.
I can't. I'm too human. I just make it so personal every time. I want everyone to really get in there.
Right. That's right. So yeah, good morning from our net embedded perspective, unavoidably embedded in embodied lived experience.
An imminent lived experience.
Yeah, that's right. So for us, it's bright and early in the morning when we're sitting down to talk about the second edition of our series, our ongoing series.
Look, it took a minute, okay, for episode 2 to drop. Of is it Machen Minisodes, or are we gonna go enter the MACHENVERSE?
Well, we've been toying, but I think we started down the Machen Minisodes, but I think subtitle into the MACHENVERSE.
You don't have to stop with the colons and subtitles.
Listen, I'm an academic writer, dude. Colons and subtitles are my bread and butter.
So yes, I mean, it just took that long for us to really wrap our heads around the cosmic horror and have something to say about it.
Yeah, and to be fair, the what we're talking about today is just a novel. It's not like a short story or even like a novella, really. Like this is just a full novel.
Yeah, full stop, a novel. Yeah. I believe it's like well, we both are reading out of the same edition, correct?
I believe so. Yours has a different cover, but I think they're both the Oxford Press,
the Great God Pen and Other Stories,
the OUP edition, right? Yeah, you've got the fancy hardcover one, yeah. But I think I should be about the same edition. So anyway, and if you haven't gathered, we're talking about Arthur Machen, and we're talking about his novel, The Three Impostors from 1895.
Yes.
And first things first, if this video is cool, like it and subscribe to the channel.
Yeah.
And leave a comment. I love the people don't like leaving comments apparently anymore on YouTube.
You could get canceled.
True. Very
true.
I
don't know. Yeah, engagement is obviously the most fun shit. And I know there's a lot of, especially the people who are would-be fans of Machen and whatnot. I feel like they've got probably some interesting information or takes or whatever, or little tidbits they could leave. So please do.
Machen head's got something to say.
Yeah, all you weird occultist, theosophists, weirdos.
Society for Psychical Research people.
Yeah, just whatever, bunk you believe. Why don't you tell us about it?
That's right. That's right. Or who knows? Maybe you'll be able to convert us.
Yeah, maybe we'll get wrapped into some sort of nether conspiracy.
Yes. Or maybe we'll be attracted to some creepy fetish object and have to follow it forever.
Yeah, Gabe will slowly turn into one of the Caligula through the magic of a coin. I'll turn into some sort of sea cucumber or something. Yes. But don't do that, because then you won't get any more of these wonderful episodes we're about to
That's
do.
That's right. That we're dropping.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was the title of but we'll just turn it's Phillips's paper that he's gonna write. Protoplasmic reversion. We'll all just revert back to goo and protoplasm.
Which is funny, because I was thinking right off the bat, first of all, do they use that same term in The Great God Pan to describe the reverse evolution or the devolution process?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if he uses precisely the phrase protoplasmic reversion, but there's definitely something similar to that, and very similar themes of devolution and degeneration of the body.
Yeah. I was thinking also, because I made this comparison before, but what's it called? Altered States is very much like the goofy kind of inheritor of all of this earlier stuff, which
100%.
There's simultaneously already a skepticism, but also a deadly seriousness about these topics, because they were so unknown and not, turned into comical versions of themselves over the ages. But all that kind of hippie new age stuff, and you know, and it starts here and is still like, yeah. I mean, I feel like protoplasmic reversion is just like literally what happens to the main character in Altered States.
Yeah.
There's some other fake scientific term for it, but
yeah,
he turns into goo.
Basically, just turns into straight fucking cosmic goo. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So okay, so the Three Impostors. This is as we said, like a more of a full novel. I think it was originally published, it was a little over 200 pages. Here it's a little over like 120, but the print is very small. Okay, people.
Yeah, and and there's not a lot of paragraph breaks.
Yeah,
we're working hard,
and the margins are very also small. So give us a fucking break. Yeah. So what's this one about? In the broad strokes, would you say? It's very, you know, I feel like it's very intentionally structured, and there's a lot of, you know, nested narratives within narratives within narratives, and
yeah,
it sort of wraps around itself by the end.
It's sort of it's the beginning and end of the book. It's like you've got the main characters, Phillips and Dyson, correct?
Phillips and Dyson, at least I forget Phillips. Is Phillips a recurring character? Dyson certainly is a recurring character.
Phillips is too. I think Phillips is literally in the next story in the collection with Dyson.
Yes. Okay. So these are two of Machen's kind of like recurring Scooby-Doo detective characters.
Yeah. They have a sort of Mulder and Scully dynamic, you
Definitely.
know. One's like a artist, writer, sort of open to new experiences. The other's like a skeptical materialist scientist guy.
Yes.
But it's kind of interesting because like in the time frame of the book, there's all of this like you said, these nesting stories about people basically regaling each other with stories within the story. But the beginning of the Three Impostors, the, you know, titular Three Impostors like leave the scene of some sort of crime that you don't know what it is yet. And then literally the last bit of the book is like 5 minutes after they've left. You get Phillips and Dyson stumbling upon the scene of their crime, and then you get to know what they did, which is kind of what you expect by the buildup of the whole rest of the book. And yeah, there's like I don't have a full count. I mean, there's, you know, because there's Three Impostors, there's basically three main stories within the story, along with some like other sides. And yeah, it's very I was thinking of Cloud Atlas as well. I know that's
I've never read it, but so what's the connection there?
You know, that structure is more like through time, but sort of the Russian doll story thing is going on. Although in the end notes of this book, they described it as Milesian, which I guess is like was the term for people telling a story about people telling stories or something like that.
Okay, interesting. I don't think I've ever heard that term before.
And also the other thing, the end. I love the end notes to this book. I said this last time, but there's
very thorough. I mean, like all of these Oxford editions, they're very, very well done.
So Machen, I guess, was like a big fan of 1001 Nights, the Arabian Tales, and I guess that's also structured in. I'm not read them, but a similar way where it's you know, it's 1001 Tales, so it's just people saying stories within this like larger, like, I guess, grounded reality.
I also read, I forget the title of the work, but it was, I also read that this was also inspired to a degree by a Robert Louis Stevenson story about a couple detectives who get involved with a like a terrorist cell by accident, and they sort of try like following this it was called, what was it called? I forget. I read this in a paper that I was reading about this story. It's called like the Cannoneers or something.
That sounds fun.
Oh man, and now I'm mad that I can't remember it, but I'll see if I can find it.
Because in the Tale of the White Powder, or whatever it's called,
yes.
he got hit with copying Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which is another Stevenson book.
Is that Stevenson? I always forget that.
Yeah. And also, you know, because I think he knew Arthur Conan Doyle, so like Mulder and Scully are obviously a doff of the cap to, Holmes and Watson, which are the Doyle characters, and then Machen knew Doyle. So
right. Okay, I found the Stevenson one. It's called The Dynamiter. But interestingly, the alternate title for it is More New Arabian Nights. So that's interesting that you mentioned the Arabian Nights, because Stevenson apparently was referencing that too in this story.
Yeah, there's some. He wears. I like the Three Impostors because it feels definitely like I don't know when he wrote it, so chronologically this may not make a ton of sense, but it feels like the culmination of a lot of things Machen believed in, and like a lot of his influences are just like very much on his sleeve here.
Absolutely. Like there's a ton of this is like I don't know if I would advise that this would be the place to start with Machen, because it's kind of, I don't know, I wouldn't say it's like difficult to read per se, but there's a lot going on.
Yeah, he's like
but it is all of his themes kind of crammed into one, or many of his themes kind of crammed into one novel.
Yeah, I would say read like a more fleshed out short story to get like a sense of his style, because otherwise this book is, like we've been mentioning, kind of a speed run of short stories in a novel.
Yeah. Right. Well, so the impetus for the action, right, is Dyson strolling along through London late at night, kind of getting lost and found again and walking around, which of course is another one of Machen's favorite themes, the sort of the urban sprawl of London as a city, and the kind of the nature of these random chance encounters that can happen in a large city that can't happen necessarily in, say, a small country town or something like that.
Urban horror, psychogeography.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
He loves British gentlemen going for a brisk ramble, a nice constitutional, and then they're just like in a haunted house. Yes. And they're like, oh dear, oh no.
How can this be?
This never happens to me. Also, I was always thinking about that.
I know we both lived in big cities, and I've gone for plenty of constitutionals.
Yeah,
and I never wind up anywhere cool.
Yeah.
So Dyson's on this constitutional in London, and this guy kind of bolts out of the bushes in front of him, right? Like running clearly from something, and he drops a little item. And Dyson is, as Matt said, kind of this romantic, sort of curious writer guy, and he's always very like, what's going on here? Like,
by Jove, more grist. Everything's grist for the mill for this writer.
That's right. And it's what the guy drops. Dyson finds out is this very old-looking, strange gold coin, right? And I believe Dyson even sees some other people chasing this guy too. He sees like the full pursuit.
Yeah.
And then so he picks up the coin, which I think importantly Machen describes as like Dyson wasn't even really interested in the people or the action or the fact that this guy was like clearly like in danger, but he's like drawn to this coin for some reason, right? And
Gollum style.
Yes, it's very Gollum style, very My Precious.
Oppa Gangnam style. Gollum style. I can't. I'm sorry.
That was good. No, that was good.
Speaking of degeneration. Sorry.
Yeah.
God damn.
So he gets this coin and he takes it back to Phillips. And Phillips, I believe, is able to identify it as the gold Tiberius, right? Which is this sort of legendary object. And Phillips, I think, is supposed to be some kind of historian, ethnologist or
He's
something
an ethnologist,
like that. Yeah.
Which is like the no longer PC term for like social anthropologist.
Yeah, right, exactly. And so Phillips is able to identify it as this item that was, they're not specific. I read somewhere that it was supposed to, I think Phillips says like it was created to memorialize some like insane like wanton excess of some Roman
some
emperor,
violent orgy,
presumably some kind
by
of violent
Tiberius
orgy. Yeah, exactly. So we slowly get the story unfolds that this item was stolen, I guess, by the young man in spectacles, is how we know him throughout most of the story. It's eventually revealed that his name is Watson. What's his name at the end? Watkins.
Let's
see. I think that's right.
Get ready for more of this. There's lots of Mr. and Mrs. something.
Yeah. It's very.
Can I read this little description though of
please
Dyson and Phillips, because it made me laugh?
Yes.
Because they're both kind of like
Walters is the guy with the glasses. Yeah.
Good thing you checked. There's just this. They're like, I'm pretty sure they're just hinting at the fact, or Machen is, because Machen was a big smoker. That Dyson and Phillips are kind of like idle fail sons that like just smoke weed and just hang out all the time. yeah, dude. Fat fucking clouds, dude. And it was just making me laugh.
Dyson and Phillips vape hard.
They're like basically like idle trust fund kids, and that's established pretty early on. Page 83 of my edition. It just goes, by the mistaken benevolence of deceased relatives, both young men were placed out of reach of hunger, and so, meditating high achievements, idled their time pleasantly away and reveled in the careless joys of a bohemianism devoid of the sharp seasoning of adversity. Yeah.
I literally have LOL next to that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, so these are kind of like your, your dandies, your flaneurs. Is that the same thing?
I don't know, but they definitely are that as well, I think.
Yeah.
So, like there's a little bit of like, they're kind of silly in a way. I think they're meant to be a little bit like.
I was only kind of joking when I mentioned Scooby-Doo earlier.
Right. Yeah.
Kind of goofy. Like,
at least they're like working, I suppose, I guess. But, yeah, basically they're just these two guys. They kind of annoy this dude in a curio shop by like hanging out for too long in his store and smoking.
Yeah. So eventually they are mainly Dyson, but Phillips as well. They start to, and again, I was talking about Machen's interest in these sorts of chance encounters that happen around London and in cities and all that. And so they start having these kind of weird experiences with weird people who tell them these very, very strange stories. And so there's like three of them, as we said, that are kind of these nested short stories within the larger novel. The first one involves someone, I forget again the names and everything. We're talking here. Hey, we're talking here.
We're just hanging out.
The first one is involves someone who claims to be the secretary or the assistant, I suppose, to a guy who traveled out to Colorado. I forget what he was looking for or why they went to Colorado in the first place. Do you remember?
I'm not sure, and I don't know if it's actually made clear.
Yeah.
Like, I think this is the same thing as the Mrs. Lally segment, where it's another kind of one of these like down and out, needing some money, very like credulous and eager to please people being roped into a misadventure.
Yes.
Because he's not initially expecting to go to Colorado, and then he does. Yeah, and basically he's just sort of like finds himself first of all, America is rendered as very creepy as well.
Yeah. America is super creepy in this short story, which is called so all the short stories are called like the novel of this whatever topic, which is I think of like again like Scooby-Doo or like are you afraid of the dark? It's like the tale of this thing, what I mean?
I was thinking, did you ever see the Ray Bradbury Theater? Do you remember
no
TV series?
No.
Fucking sick, but that's what I was thinking.
That sounds lit though. So this first one is called The Novel of the Dark Valley, and it's about this guy Mr. Smith and this person that's talking to Dyson who claims to have been his assistant, Mr. Wilkins.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's I think Smith is some kind of doctor or something who's in he's written as having an interest in again, sort of an anthropological interest in like older cultures and traditions and things like that. So I think that's kind of like the vague reason they're coming to America and going out west.
You get the sense that like it probably has something to do with like native peoples,
yes,
like, and accessing the, you know, forbidden knowledge of their ritual practices or something.
Yes.
Because yeah, because Mr. Smith, first of all, probably not his name. You get the names of the three people working for this fourth kind of like head shadowy figure.
Dr. Lipsius.
Dr. Lipsius. Which, you know, in the end notes, it's suggested that like that's just sort of a mild scrambling of some famous Egyptologist, which makes sense because he's got all these creepy pleasure. He's like a mixture of like a modern day Tiberius and then like this other guy, and he's got like fucking sarcophagi in his house and pyramid shit.
Yes. Lipsius becomes very, very creepy by the end.
But sorry, what's the name of the assistant again?
The assistant's name is Wilkins.
Yeah. So Wilkins, they take this like very creepy train ride through, you know, still kind of wild America, I guess.
Can I just read that part? Because I loved that description of the train, the train ride. So this is one morning, however, when I called at the hotel, according to instructions, my master informed me that I must hold myself in readiness for a sea voyage, and to spare unnecessary detail, in the course of a fortnight, we had landed at New York. Mr. Smith told me that he was engaged on a work of a special nature, in the compilation of which some peculiar researches had to be made. In short, I was given to understand that we were to travel to the far west. After about a week had been spent in New York, we took our seats in the cars and began a journey tedious beyond all conception. Day after day and night after night, the great train rolled on, threading its way through cities the very names of which were strange to me, passing at slow speed over perilous viaducts, skirting mountain ranges and pine forests, and plunging into dense tracts of woods where mile after mile and hour after hour the same monotonous growth of brushwood met the eye. And all along the continual clatter and rattle of the wheels upon the ill-laid lines made it difficult to hear the voices of our fellow passengers. We were a heterogeneous and ever-changing company. Often I woke up in the dead of night with a sudden grinding jar of the brakes, and looking out found that we had stopped in the shabby street of some frame-built town, lighted chiefly by the flaring windows of the saloon. Love it. Very just, it becomes very eerie, you know, this creepy train ride.
And then they find themselves in Reading, which is not real.
Yep.
And then they
at first I was like Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
that's not
Reading,
far enough.
They're just in Pennsylvania. Yeah, they're just in Allentown.
Definitely creepy.
And then they go out.
Shout out to Allentown. We love you, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I guess. Shout out to Billy Joel. They go to some encampment, and then from there, it seems like
shit hits the fan quick.
But Wilkins doesn't know what the fuck's going on. Like he's just at this camp, and then suddenly they're like, you can't leave, and he's like, fuck you, I'm gonna. And then he tries, and then everyone seems to hate him and think he's a monster, or just they think he's another guy. They mistake him, I think, for Smith.
Yes.
And then, you know, to the degree where like his life is threatened, they're like, it's on site, Smith. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Exactly. It's implied strongly that they have some previous reason for hating Smith.
Yeah, the town's been defrauded and violently done ill by the Smith person to the point where they will kill him. And then in his evasion of other townsfolk trying to just blast his head off, Wilkins stumbles on one of Smith's actual rituals, right? Where there's this like posse of, you know, hardened criminals, you know, the worst of society. And he's doing some weird thing where he's on some sort of stone altar, and there's like nooses or something like that. And he's like, shed your, you know, whisper to me your like wildest desires, like keep them focused in the forefront of your mind. And then he kills them.
Yep.
And supposedly they'll, you know, upon death, they will achieve whatever desires they've like thought of.
Yes.
And that's about the extent that I got of the ritual, and it gets broken up by the townspeople.
Right. And then they, I forget Smith and Wilkins escape and come back to London. And so recall that these stories are all in service of attempting to locate the man with spectacles, right?
Right.
And so Wilkins, talking to Dyson, describes Smith as basically the man with spectacles that he knows or suspects Dyson has seen. And he's like, hey, if you ever see this guy, let me know, because they're all trying to find this guy. And so they have these crazy stories about who he is and trying to find information about where he might be in London.
And it could be a lie, or it could be like a lie where they say mostly what's true to get at what they actually want.
Yes.
Because, it's made clear by the end that the three main tales are told by the three servants of Lipsius. And so to some degree, they are kind of involved in something weird. So it's possible. And in the beginning of the book, I don't know. I feel like Mr. Smith, whatever his actual name is like, that conjuring in the West was more difficult than I expected, or something like that. Like,
yes.
He was doing something weird, like maybe conjuring a demon, or,
yes,
I don't know.
Yeah. It seems like because they do reference, at the beginning, they do reference the sort of, like characters. The Three Impostors reference like their own characters from the stories that they tell, I should say. And so it's kind of like unclear exactly which, how much of the stories are true and how much are sort of just being deployed in order to try to find information on the man with glasses.
Yeah.
So the other two stories which also sort of occur in chance encounters. There's one where Dyson is going to see another friend of his, Russell, right?
Yes,
who
the writer.
is another writer who lives on the sort of second story apartment in this building. And as Dyson please.
There's a little jab at that I thought was funny. It's not a passage I'm going to read, but just like Dyson is like, he's like the fanciful writer, and Russell is like the capital R realist.
I know exactly the line.
Social writer. You can read the line if you want, because I can't remember. I just know that it's just like, he's just fucking so miserable and depressed and poor in the service of like something that is ultimately not real, which is realism. Yes. In his sense. And I was just thinking of The Confidence Man as well.
Oh, 100%. I think I know the exact line that you're thinking of, or at least I underlined a line with respect to Russell. Let me see if I can find it.
Because when I say that like the Three Impostors is like a fun, thinly veiled, just like Machen laying out a lot of what he thinks and like doing social commentary and stuff too in funny ways. That's one of them, just like,
definitely.
Quick little aside. Here's this guy trying to write realism. He's poor and sad.
Yeah. Of course I can't find it right now, but
it's all good.
Yeah, it is a really funny line. So anyway, he, this is the story told to Dyson by Miss Lally, right?
Right, yeah.
And she, again, was a sort of assistant to this kind of paranormal researcher type guy. In this case, a guy named Professor Greg. And she, Professor Greg, classic sort of Machen character who has kind of harbored some strange, pseudoscientific or on the fringes of scientific theories for a while in his career, and has never really had the opportunity to pursue them, and ultimately gets this opportunity. And his theory basically is that he thinks that there may be essentially undiscovered tribes kind of in the wilds of Wales, basically, right?
Yeah.
And so he takes this research trip to a farm and sort of is doing this work where he's trying to see if there's any evidence of these creatures or potentially peoples, right?
Well, I think it's I'm trying to find the note because it gives the Welsh pronunciation, but it's the fair folk.
Okay.
Like that's kind of the the fairy is the god damn it, I'm not gonna be able to do this.
Do it.
The Tilwyth Teg. The Tilwyth Teg.
Love it. We gotta comment on our Confidence Man video praising the accents done. So I don't remember what I don't remember what we did. I don't remember what accents you guys did, but
thank you. Yeah, I'll swing for the fences. The Tilwyth Twig. The Tilwyth Twig Teg.
There it is.
Which is just fair. It's just translates to, I guess, the fair folk.
Right.
Yeah. So that's basically what Dr. Greg is. And again, he's one of these people, skeptic, hard science, reluctantly being forced to confront the reality of this potential thing that he dismissed for years and years and years.
Exactly. Okay, I'm sorry, I did find the line that describes Mr. Russell.
Hit us with it.
Amongst the many friends who were favored with the occasional pleasure of Mr. Dyson's society was Mr. Edgar Russell, realist and obscure struggler.
Owned, economically owned too.
Yeah.
Well, so the other sentiment that comes out, even though the people who are largely forcing normal folk, aka the everyman of learning and leisure, Dyson and Phillips, into confronting like the darker mysteries that underlie the fictions of our fucking society. Right. Machen himself genuinely believed that these things, maybe not as precisely written here, but just in general, that there that there was a veil to be pierced and that things were like chaotic and crazy, and there was some like genuine insight to be gained from like the occult, and he was a mystic himself,
right?
As having slowly been a I think like a pretty hard-nosed Anglican or something,
raised. Yeah
So like it's just an interesting mixture, because like he's definitely not a fan of science or like scientific materialism, I guess, and like the sort of Enlightenment perspective where everything's sort of like
the presumption of it, right? Like that we can figure out all of the mysteries of the universe through,
right?
Yeah, chemistry or whatever.
Yeah, he's not like a Spinozist sort of, but like at the same time, he's like, and that's bad because he's conservative. So there's just, I don't know, it's like this interesting dance where he's like,
right, because he also does mock, kind of, while respecting the critiques of like hard science, he also does mock the kind of like like Society for Psychic Research type folks too. Like there's an element of mockery. And like, Phil, he talks about Phillips, for example, early on as being the kind of hard science guy, but also like deeply credulous. And like, there's this whole bit about like,
I can read that if you want.
Giving like goofy phenomenon Greek names and then taking it seriously.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Can I read that part?
Yeah,
I think
please.
It's funny. Yeah, flattering himself with the title of materialist, he was in truth one of the most credulous of men, but he required a marvel to be neatly draped in the robes of science before he would give it any credit, and the wildest dreams took solid shape to him if only the nomenclature were severed or severe and irreproachable. He laughed at the witch, but quailed before the powers of the hypnotist, lifting his eyebrows when Christianity was mentioned, but adoring Prodile and the ether. For the rest, he prided himself on a boundless skepticism. The average tale of wonder he heard with nothing but contempt, and he would certainly not have credited a word or syllable of Dyson's stories of the pursuer and the pursued. Yeah, just basically like he just needs it gussied up some other way.
Exactly. I realize that I've got my stories a little bit backwards here. So Phillips is the one who's told the story of Dr. Greg by Lally, and then Dyson is told the story about the white powder later. But when he's visiting Russell. So I got those backwards.
Right. So Dyson gets hit with the first, then the female agent hits Phillips, and then
under the pretext of her asking him to help her find her lost brother, who she like saw and ran away.
She does a sob story.
Yes, and then she tells him this story about Dr. Greg.
Yeah.
And going to search for fairies and the fair folk.
And Dr. Greg has something that he does something similar. What's also interesting is how that story and then the white powder medicine, to me, they seem like they affect a similar kind of change. Like,
yes,
like it's weird. It's like through the conduit of the son, the like mixed son of potentially the progeny of like a rape of one of the fairy folk and this Welsh woman. They have this like kid who is what they call a natural, which is the old way of saying touched in the head,
right?
But then through that, it seems so weird. Like Dr. Greg is capable of accessing an even more primordial being that like a tentacle comes out of like the body of this kid and like removes a bust that was way too high for anyone to get off of the top shelf of something, and like so like
it's
really
super
weird mixed
super
stuff
creepy
going on.
Which again, speaking of the kid who I think is just Craddock, that's the family last name.
I
don't know if the kid ever gets a first name.
He does, but I can't remember.
Okay. But he, like you said, it's sort of implied that this kid might be the progeny of one of these kind of forest people and the mother of the family on the farm. And of course, that's also one of the main plot threads in The Great God Pan.
Yes.
So again, right, like,
and even
the MACHENVERSE, dude.
Yes, yeah, we might not have emphasized that enough. He keeps the thread going. There's common characters, and I think even in this one, there's a reference very quickly to just like to the Great God Pan's storyline and history, like because that one's all about this like girl, right? This little girl,
yes,
who kind of like has congress with the god of nature, essentially, pagan god of nature.
And there's a
they say there's like this young girl, like the Dr. Greg is drawn to that spot, particularly in Wales, and he says one of the stories he heard that interested him was about a young girl.
It's the same town. It's Caerman.
Okay.
It's not the same town, but he says, Greg's talking about, I've taken a country house in the west of England, not far from Caerman, a quiet little town, which is the name of the town where the Great God Pan takes place. And then earlier in the same story, he says, if you ask me the subject matter of the collection, it will not seem extraordinary. A servant girl at a farmhouse who disappeared from her place and has never been heard of. A child supposed to have slipped down some old working on the mountains, some queer scribbling on a limestone rock, a man murdered with a blow from a strange weapon. These are all these examples, and these are all references to events or events that are also referenced in Great God Pan.
Yeah.
So it's all very cinematic universe vibes. Shout out to the new Spider-Man movie, I guess. Haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, something like that. Or just all of Marvel.
Yeah,
I'm sure
Marvel.
People will love that comparison.
Yeah. But so anyway, so there's this story of Dr. Greg, who ultimately goes into the woods himself after seeing what happens to this boy who turns into this necrotic mush.
Yeah, it seems like the juice ain't worth the squeeze, if you know what I'm saying.
Exactly.
Like, why would I want to just turn into cosmic cum? Is that my reward for my awesome discoveries?
Exactly. So Greg goes into the forest and is essentially never heard from again, right?
Yeah, he's trying to go to the fairy world. That's there's an alternate reality suggested. I forget the name of that. It's not like Avalon, but there's a realm of fairies.
Right. And so then Phillips kind of goes off and ponders writing this work, Protoplasmic Reversion, based on the story that he's heard from Mrs. Lally or Miss Lally.
Yeah.
And so then we get sort of to the final story, which is the story of the white powder. There's a few things in between. There's a guy named Burton that Dyson winds up talking to, who talks to him about this guy, Mr. Matthias, who is sort of a collector of
torture devices.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then he commits potentially suicide, Dr. Matthias.
Yes, by locking himself in his own Iron Maiden.
Consummating, it seems like he seems like he wanted to.
Yeah.
Which is that was a cool thing. It's like, it's not the Iron Maiden, like the thing that closes over you. It's like a statue of a woman that hugs you to death.
Yes, right. It's not exactly the same as the classic like coffin style Iron Maiden.
Yeah, it's like a literal Iron Maiden sex doll that will like crush your spine and like break your neck. Yeah.
Yes. Which pretty is cool. Let's keep it real. That's like honestly what anyone who buys a sex doll secretly wants them to do anyway.
They want to be crushed to death. Yeah. They want to die.
Medieval torture device waifu.
Yeah, God.
Yeah. So anyway, Dyson gets the final story from I believe Miss Leicester. Would that be how you say it?
Miss Leicester, yeah. Leicester Square.
Leicester Square, yeah. And this is about her brother, who kind of gets wrapped up in this. He gets prescribed this strange powder from like the local chemist, and essentially gets addicted to it, and like won't leave his room, and won't take food or anything.
Yeah.
And eventually,
it's not cocaine. It's not
cocaine. It's not cocaine. But eventually she's down in the, it's pretty grisly. She's like down in the,
it was the scariest one in my opinion.
You think?
I don't like there's like someone in a room near you. You don't know what's going on. I don't know why.
That is creepy.
You know, in Pet Sematary, there's like the wife, she tells that story about her sister with like spinal meningitis.
Oh my God. I got goosebumps just thinking about it.
And just, she has to go up there and like feed her every now and again. It's just like that kind of shit. I don't know.
No, that is a very eerie, like trope. And so she's basically down in like the drawing room, I guess, with her like maid lady, or maybe it was the doctor or somebody. And like, goop starts like dripping through the floorboards, basically.
Well, what I like about this story is like, once again, for the third time, you've got this like studious, assiduous student of the law, right? Her brother, like a dude who's like, I'm going to learn the rules as a job,
Yes.
And then he starts taking this powder because like I think he's just kind of anemic, and like he's studying too much,
overworking,
not eating. And then it's kind of suggested that the powder turns him into like Dionysus for like a small amount of time.
Yes.
He starts getting fat and just enjoying pleasures, and just constantly talking about like pleasures of the flesh.
Yes.
Just getting fatter and meaner. And then he turns into
goop.
He turns into goo.
He turns into gnarly goop.
He turns into goo.
And so, but and then there's this again, getting back to this scientific theme, like when the powder at first started adversely affecting her brother, she went to the chemist and was like, dude, what the hell did you give this guy? And he's like, just the normal thing. But they wind up sending a sample off to be analyzed like chemically, and the story ends with
Dr. Chambers,
Dr. Haberden, right?
Haberden.
I think that's the chemist who they send it off to. Chambers was the, no, it is, you're right. Chambers was the chemist. Haberden was the guy who prescribed it, I think.
Thank God.
And so anyway, Chambers sort of, they basically are like, I don't know what this is, and something's fucked up, but we're washing our hands of it.
Yeah, but I'm scared and I'm not going to talk to you ever again.
Yeah, exactly.
And the doctor, Haberden, is like, he just dies on a boat mysteriously as well.
Yes, that's right.
He tries to like, he gets so spooked by the goo man that he tries to leave London, or leave the UK rather. And he mysteriously perishes on the boat leaving.
Yep. So finally, the story sort of comes to part of a conclusion when Dyson is in a bar, basically, right? And he overhears a conversation between, I forget exactly who, Mr. Davies, right? And Burton, who he had met earlier, who told him the story of the Iron Maid thing.
And Burton, by the way, he just straight up charmed his way into Dyson's house or Phillips's house.
Yes.
And just straight up tried to steal shit.
Yep.
That was his tactic.
Again, right? All of them in the service of trying to find the coin, which they're all, one of the things I think is interesting is like that Machen kind of leaves open is whether or not all of these agents of Lipsius are, to what degree these encounters are chance, and to what degree that they're all kind of like drawn by the kind of aura of the coin, which is implied to have this kind of like almost like magical, like fetishistic, like fetish object power.
Yeah.
Which I think, even that framing of the story is really interesting in the context of like the whole discourse about science, because these are sort of men of science who are kind of still enraptured by this, like I keep saying, fetish object type thing. And again, like just sort of the overlay of patterns between unscientific and scientific, societies, quote unquote. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's like we said before, Machen takes a sort of non-conservative conservative stance on the issue. It's like he believes in evil, I guess, right? As like a religious person. Like he believes that like we can discover things that will unleash evil because us humans do not know how to like countenance it or wield it or anything like that, and we're fallen beings, and so it would be bad, but they are real. Like evil is real, and but also it's so funny because like Machen ends up joining the the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which I think is like an early theosophical society, sort of like,
more about all that stuff than I do, so yeah.
So it's just funny because like when I think of that, it feels like he was taking seriously the existence of these things as like an occultist and a mystic. But then when I think of like Blavatsky and like the Theosophical Society, I think of people who are just ostensibly for good trying to wield those very powers as well. So I don't know. It's just an interesting move on his part. He's very skeptical, but he still joins the shit and is a theosophist at some point.
Definitely a man of kind of contradictions and I guess kind of wavering proclivities when it comes to that sort of thing.
I just wonder if he wanted powers.
Dude, who doesn't want powers?
He wanted magic powers.
Can you blame him?
No.
Can you blame him?
It was such a heady time. You didn't know if it was bunk or not at the time. You were like, hieroglyphics, fuck, maybe if I read them,
I'll get powers.
I'll learn how to breathe underwater.
Or if I could find this sick coin.
Yeah. And it's just like, I think even in the endnotes, they dutifully note that, part of it was just Westerners and British people, intellectuals seeing the colonial plunder, basically, and just being like, oh shit, oh, like, well, and another steal the ancient secrets of all these other people we sort of lord over now.
Another thing that exactly. And another thing that I read that I think is interesting is it talks about how this story and a lot of Machen's writing kind of like signals this, because people sometimes talk about Machen and some of his writing as like participating in like decadence in terms of literary style.
Right.
And that being a sort of social movement at the time also, which involved like being really obsessed with like objects and like little trinkets and like that being sort of interior decorating meta at the time, as it were, right?
Right. A different kind of materialism.
Yes, exactly. And so it's sort of, decadence being this kind of like a transitionary period, into what we now think of as like consumer society, right? Like basic, materialistic consumerism that we have sort of today. and Machen kind of folding in all of these scientific concerns and like fetish objects and like objects having a sort of pseudo magical attractive power, being like a prefiguring some of the ways people think about consumer objects. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I was enjoying reading this in conjunction with The Confidence Man at a certain point, because you get the early half and the latter half of the 19th century, the entire extent of which is just such a like interesting time period where you shift by the 20th into the train of consumer society, and like capitalist ascendancy is just it's locked in by that point. But now you have these moments of doubt and people coping with it in all these different ways, and one of them seems to be this.
Yes. So basically the story ends with Dyson finding the journal of the man with spectacles. Right?
Does he find it? Wait, he does?
Well,
does he write the story of it?
Let's see. Well, no, it's a pocketbook that he finds left on the table in the bar. Okay. Right? I believe. And we don't know if that's on purpose by the agents of Lipsius or what.
Right.
But he finds this basically this account of the guy with spectacles who essentially is initiated into this secret society run by Lipsius, right?
Yeah.
And his initiation involves drawing this other gentleman basically to his own murder, right? Like luring him to Lipsius's house so he can be killed. And then he realizes that essentially this guy's been killed, and then Lipsius turned him into a mummy and was going to sell him to a museum. which is
funny.
Funny and dark.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where that part of the story ends. And then of course we circle back to the beginning with Dyson and Phillips on one of their constitutionals, finding this creepy old house. And the original scene kind of repeats but goes further, where they actually go in and they're going around the house and they find Walters's body strung up in an upstairs room, having been like burned through the center with like hot coals.
Right, which I believe was an old, I forget what it is, but it's a pretty old torture technique where hot embers melt you through the core over a long period of time.
You love to
disgusting.
See it. Yeah. And I believe they take one of his fingers too, the Three Impostors, which, because in the beginning they're seen carrying out a bloody little package.
The lady.
Yes. And that's it, basically.
Yeah. I love Lipsius. I feel like he's such a good, I know he must come back. I think the Lost Club, the first very short story in this, is like another little reference to this group of people.
That's probably right.
And Lipsius is like he's sort of like a Satanist, which is so interesting again to me, because like Aleister Crowley was a member of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn with, whatever. So it's just like interesting. Like he's like, he wrote like whatever, inspired a lot of Satanism, but then like Lipsius, he's essentially offering for everyone to follow him and live deliciously and do what thou wilt, right? He's all about the pleasure. He loves pleasure, you know what I mean? Like utilitarianism, British utilitarianism taken to a satanic degree.
Yes, which gets back to the brother in the white powder who becomes, like you said, sort of taps into the pure Dionysian. For a little while there before he becomes goop.
The Hedons or whatever they're called are off the chart.
Yeah, exactly. The Hedons. Yep. Yeah.
But so yeah, they find the body finally of the man in spectacles, and they just leg it out of there.
They're just like, gotta go.
And apparently they walked in just 5 minutes after the other three left.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
one thing got the coin, right?
And I think, yeah, Dyson still has the coin hidden away somewhere, and he's obviously a little spooked about it. But we don't really, the coin doesn't really come back. The imposters never find the coin, and Dyson still has it at the end of the story.
Yeah.
So I will actually be interested to see if the coin resurfaces at some point in the MACHENVERSE.
Very true. You know,
one thing that I thought was really interesting, and I kind of wanted to get your take on, is like, why do you think he repeats? Because the scene, the prologue and then the ending are basically the same scene, but if you read them closely, they're slightly different. The dialogue is different. Even the same, some of the same things that Dyson says he repeats, but not exactly verbatim in the second half.
Is Dyson speaking in the end though? Because it's the three, right? And then
so at the beginning, you do see Dyson and Phillips come up. It's very, very briefly, right?
And then he comments on like the look of the house.
Yes. He says, let's see. Phillips, replied the elder, it must be said, the more pompous of the two. I yield to fantasy. I cannot withstand the influence of the grotesque. Here, where all is falling into dimness and dissolution, and we walk in Sidarn gloom, and the very air of heaven goes moldering to the lungs, I cannot remain commonplace. I look at that deep glow on the panes, and the house lies all enchanted. That very room, I tell you, is within all blood and fire. And that's the beginning. That's the prologue.
Right.
But then at the end, they come back and repeat essentially the same scene
monologue,
but it's a little bit different. Let's see, I'm trying to find the exact so this is basically the same phrase, but it's different. So this is before they go in at the end. Here, said Dyson, one might moralize over decay and death. Here, all the stage is decked out with the symbols of dissolution. The Sidarn gloom, same phrase as the beginning, but different, and twilight hangs heavy around us, and everywhere within the pale dankness has found a harbor, and the very air is charged and brought to accord with the scene. To me, I confess, this deserted house is as moral as a graveyard, and I find something sublime in that lonely Triton, deserted in the midst of his water pool. He is the last of the gods. They have left him, and he remembers the sound of water falling on water and the days that were sweet. So it's like calls back, but in different language, some similar phrases and some but it's different. And I just wondered if you made anything of that.
I didn't actually pick up on that, and I can't tell from the change if there's some subtle shift in like sentiment or messaging there.
Right.
So I mean, I don't know if it's intentional. Maybe it's just to seed even more doubt as to the reality of what's going on. Do you have a take on that?
Not really. I just sort of noticed that, it's repeated, but different. You know what I mean? So maybe it's just something about the way patterns repeat in human life, but it's like, what's the George Lucas thing? You know what I mean? It's
it's like jazz.
Something like that. I forget the exact thing.
It's poetry. It rhymes or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. That's George Lucas, right? I'm not making that up.
No, yeah, that's his prequels.
Yeah. So maybe there's that sort of a point, because again, right, like Machen revisits characters, he revisits themes across stories. And so maybe this is just that sort of expressing itself within this one story. But I thought,
or is he like a parallel universe guy? Was that a notion that was floating around?
I don't know.
Did they cross some other sort of like veil or membrane of time and space and to where they were slightly different?
It's totally possible,
or did Machen forget and just rewrite the last bit?
Well, I don't think it's that, because the book is so it's so like intentionally structured, you know what I mean? That I just think it's like interesting from a literary point of view too, that he's almost like drawing your attention to it by it being different. Like we're back at the same scene, but it's different. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, the idea of like the image of Triton gets brought up a bunch, like the forgotten like son of an ancient god, even, right. You know what I mean? And it's like, I don't know. This is me just fucking building the road as I'm walking on it. But like what is the phrasing at the initial part? Like, this is the like blood and fire that is within all of us.
So they're talking about the house, but
right.
With some implications, right? For sure. So he says, I look at that deep glow on the panes, and the house lies all enchanted. That very room, I tell you, is within all blood and fire.
And
of course, they don't know that, but that's actually true. There's a dead guy in there who was lit on fire.
Right. Yeah. But does it just mean the darkness in creation, essentially?
Yeah, that could be what the house is, right?
Just this, yeah. And then like, but then they're sort of like commenting on like Triton a little bit more. I don't know, just like, and that's more like, it seems to me more about like the idea that there are these ancient things all around us, even all of these like sort of exhausted symbols and that still retain their power, you know, and we just forget about them and let them molder, but they're not any less having an effect upon our lives. It's just now We've forgotten them, so they're that much more dangerous and prone to being used by other people. Totally. I don't know. That's my best swing at that.
No, I think that sounds that's helpful. I think that's a helpful analysis. All right. So yeah, what any other concluding thoughts on this? Creepy. Good. What did you think overall?
I liked it a lot. I mean, I just love Machen's writing. It's a very readable, but still very like I don't know, proper or I don't know how you would phrase it. Like nice old, not old English, but yeah, like academic 1800s English.
Yes.
But yeah, he's funny, and like I said, he's the progenitor of cosmic horror. I like it. I really like Machen. I like reading him. I like it better than Lovecraft.
Yeah, I honestly I don't know if I've ever read any Lovecraft, so I can't really speak to that, but I would love to read some and do a comparison.
Well, what I like Machen too, because, and I think it's because he's a little bit of like at the end of the day, like a stodgy British conservative. Like, you know, Lovecraft was conservative, at least during the, you know, early parts of his life, racist and all that. But he was like an atheist, like hardcore.
Right.
And I feel like that idea between, for him, the universe being indifferent, and for Machen, the universe being a war between, I guess, good and evil, but there's a great malignancy. I don't know. That tension to me is like more interesting.
It's more kind of psychologically like fertile, I think. Yeah. In Machen.
And now that the indifferent universe has like essentially been Rick and Mortyized, like, yeah, there's just something also just fresh about
Lovecraft doesn't hit different. Yeah. Doesn't hit quite the same. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think that's really well put. Did we give a score last time? I forget.
We didn't, because we said that this collection comprised in and of itself an entire novel in some sense, because it's all connected. Okay. So I don't think
let's continue. We'll continue that tradition then.
Yeah. Until next year.
Hey, everything else in this book is a lot shorter, so we should be able to be back at you with something sooner rather than later. But yeah, it probably will be next year because it's the end of the year.
Oh yeah. Gotcha.
All right, everyone. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, like, subscribe. Patreon will be down below where we post other stuff. And check out the podcast, Instagram, Twitter. Come on now.
And pop off in the comments with just like weird data, whatever stuff you'd like to see, all that.
Tell us all the weird stuff you know about Machen and these weird societies and fetish objects.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. Thanks.
Peace and love.